Sorry for the interruption. So, I want to get very practical with this next phase of the talk here, which is, okay, spirituality and how that plays out in what you're doing in terms of your path and practice. So the idea here is there has generally always been one universal spiritual process, experiential process, because the idea of spirituality is it should be more than beliefs, right? And so there are views and beliefs and philosophy you've been given, that you like and you understand, and that usually comes with practices and rituals. Now, generally in most religions, this kind of ends at, certain rituals that one does for certain purposes. Then there are certain traditions, especially Eastern traditions or very mystical Western traditions, that will get into practices you do, right? And it's usually kind of a foreign concept to more of the Christian Islamic viewpoint. There's no practices to do, right? There are rituals and places to go to, right? But from the more Catholic point of view, more Roman Catholic, practicing being a good person, right? So maybe the Eastern Orthodox, their forms of meditation, which they're now getting into more practices. But the idea of certain practices for certain forms of cultivation is really what is the specialty of the East and what they held intact for so long and brought forth, right? So now what I'm saying is, though, if you take a massive overview of these practices all over the world, but primarily in the East, you see themes. That's key here. You see certain themes, certain commonalities, and there's certain lineages and traditions, especially in the East, and there were probably in the West that are gone now, that get into detail as to stages of what should happen if you're doing the right work. Now that's very interesting to me, right? And fascinating. And I think it's so important because then we finally have a roadmap, right? And what is a roadmap, right? There are signposts and signs. You know where you are. You know what's next. You know where you've been. You know where you're going, right? So you have that. Is what's fascinating. It's always been there. And what usually has been done is different elements are often extracted out of that roadmap and presented as the main bulk of what you should do. And that's kind of what you end up getting as a hodgepodge in modern day times. You see, so I'm going to focus on the entirety of the roadmap today in a very brief way, with the time we have, right? But to give you an overview of what some of these basic stages are that were described in some of these very ancient, very detailed traditions and lineages. And I'll mention some of those as well, some of those lineages, But the point is, once you see that, then you can kind of see, this religion or that religion is focusing on that or that aspect. And they kind of forgot about that, or they're ignoring that, or they kind of bypass that. Or, okay, what I'm doing is doing that and that, but it's not doing that. Oh, maybe that's important. So it's really my intention here to really help people understand, okay, whatever your personal spirituality is, and the thing about spirituality is, it's a very personal thing, obviously, right? And you have a very personal path. However it forms, it may be fully intact, something you're given. It may be something you adopt, something you become part of that's already kind of fully intact, or you may piecemeal it together, as a lot of you have done. Or trying to piecemeal it together. Or just in a very confused state, don't know what to piecemeal together, and you know you want to, but you're not sure where to go, right? So my goal here is to help all of you see what the big picture is and to help you with your own personal path. And that's one of the beautiful merits of the Hindu-based traditions, where it is based on what I just said. There's a universal system, and you can piecemeal it together the way you want. It really doesn't matter. And that's kind of a declared philosophy. It really doesn't matter. There are many roads leading up to the same mountaintop, right?
All paths lead to the same end.
Exactly. And that's the central premise of the Indian-based traditions, primarily. Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, as well as Sikhism. The primary ones we have now. So, we have two very well-established roadmaps that many of you may be familiar with that really I'm going to use as a backbone for what I'm going to share, which is one, obviously, is Patanjali's 8 limbs, right? And whoever's been into yoga or in the Eastern traditions kind of knows what I'm talking about. His 8 stages that he outlined in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali, at least 2,000 years ago, maybe even before that. But most of modern day yoga we have in the West is based on his view of things that he brought forth. But the thing to keep in mind, if you read the Yoga Sutras, who's read the Yoga Sutras? A little bit. Let's open it up a little bit, maybe looked at a chapter or two, okay? He doesn't talk much about Hatha Yoga. He doesn't mention any poses, really, right? He talks about a lot of other stuff, but he mentions the 8 limbs, and the 8 limbs are kind of compiled from primarily Yoga Sutras and others, but we connect him to the 8 limbs, and for those of you who don't know the 8 limbs, it's basically the first 2 things are what you should do and shouldn't do, basically behavior and ethics and morality, which is always the foundation, which is what I mentioned last time. Most religions will begin and stop there, is the thing, right? The 10 Commandments begins there, right? The Sila, the 5 precepts of Buddhism, right? The Yamas and Niyamas of the Yoga Sutras. How to be a good person. How to not create suffering for yourself and others is the foundation, right? So Yama Niyamas are the first 2 stages. Asanas, how to purify the body. And there's the way yoga is practiced is slightly different now than what it was originally meant to, right? The yoga poses that you do during yoga class were originally meant to purify the body. What that means is to open up the channels of the body, the energy channels, for the purpose of leading to real Kundalini awakening. That's it, is the thing. So that was the original purpose of Hatha Yoga. So, and for people who want to do that, you can really focus on that and really progress in that to prepare for classical Kundalini awakening, right? So, the 4th stage is pranayama, how to control your breath, all these various breath exercises many of you are familiar with. All the breath work that we have in the West essentially stems from pranayama, rebirthing, breath work, holotropic breathing, all stems from original pranayama teachers kind of brought this stuff forth, right? But the point of that was to also prepare you for Kundalini awakening, okay? The holy grail of all pranayama, if you start to dive into it, is kumbhaka, breath retention. How long can you hold your breath in a meditative state and be relaxed, right? All the pranayama is supposed to get you to that place, right? The asanas, all of it is to get you to where you can sit in full lotus. It's the pinnacle posture in Hatha Yoga, full lotus. Why? Because that will make it conducive to awaken your Kundalini and advance in the higher stages of yoga, which is more meditation. Pranayama, getting to where your breath is still and quiet, is meant to get you to where, and we'll talk about this in detail, the first awakening of Kundalini, which only happens when you've achieved 0 breath, still breath. Right? So pranayama is training you for that. Then the 5th through 8th stages of the 8 limbs are basically how to meditate, how to draw your senses within, how to concentrate, which leads to getting into the zone, and then which leads to an expanded level of awakening, samadhi, which is a whole different topic, which we may get into if we have time today. So that's a very wonderful roadmap, a very specific roadmap for a specific way of doing things, right? If you're into that. Not everyone is. It's a lot of work, a lot of dedication, a lot of practice. Some of you may know, right? And it takes a lifetime to be dedicated to that, right? But usually you never get to the meditative state, is the thing, especially in the West. You spend a lot of time working on your body and your breath, and it's wonderful. Wonderful benefits, get very healthy, you feel great, the vitality is flowing, but the meditative piece is still there. So that's one roadmap that many of you are familiar with. Now the other one, of course, is the 8 stages of the Buddha, the Eightfold Path, right? That is now a more encompassing view of things, which I'm kind of now going to draw in to kind of expand what I'm talking about, which begins the same way, right? Right view. Find a philosophy. Find something you believe in. Find something you feel strongly about that you see as important for yourself spiritually. That's what right view means, you see? And the idea, it's a right view because hopefully you want to adopt something that's actually conducive to spirituality, right? But you may not. It may be some other view, and the point is, well, that may lead you down a wrong avenue, right? And so right view in this context is having a mindset that will lay the foundation for what comes next. So from right view, then we get into, again, behavior, right? Right action, right effort, right livelihood, right speech. These are all part of the Eightfold Path the Buddha laid down. And these are all normal behavior, right? And the point is, these came first because the idea is you gotta fix your ego. You gotta fix your personality. You gotta heal. And this is also Maslow's focus of self-actualization, right? Become the best version of yourself is the idea of the personality self. Focus on your strengths. Try to work on your weaknesses, right? And this entails, of course, work on the things that get in the way. Work on your negative emotions. Work on your addictions. Work on your phobias. And that's the bulk of where most of us end up being, because it's the most important, right? And it's what derails everyone, because we want to bypass some of that. Or we're not aware of some things, right? Or things are too hard. Things are too painful. We don't want to, because it's not easy. It's work. But that is the beginning. And most of the modern day religions they want you to focus on that in some way or another, right? Do good to others and be nice to yourself, right? The golden rule. Now, the idea is the Buddha was like, okay, well, there's more to it than that, obviously. That's the foundation. Good. Try not to lie when you talk. Right speech. Be honest. Are you doing that with yourself and others? Right? Is the work you're doing honorable and ethical? That's a big one for a lot of people. And that's kind of harder to sometimes manage. Are you making the right effort? And that means a very particular thing in this context. But what it eventually leads to, as you advance in the Eightfold Path, is then right energy is the term if you look it up. Right energy, what does that mean? Interesting, right? And that is properly cultivating your vitality then. And this is where a lot of us kind of get hyper-focused as well. And this is where the Kundalini, see, the Buddha didn't talk about Kundalini, is the thing. That wasn't his focus. Even though he was coming out of a cultural mindset where Kundalini was very open and obvious in ancient India, right? But he didn't focus on that for very specific reasons. But he did mention it, and but he talked about it as energy, kind of as his functional way of looking at it, right? Find ways to increase your vitality is the point. It begins there, right? So you gotta heal, you gotta keep healing until you feel good in your body, right? Until you feel more energetic. And that's a process for all of us. Some of it have it better than others based on karma and things like that. And genetics and lifestyle. But that comes down to, which is very important, the idea of how you are cultivating what's called, now from the Taoist perspective, cultivating your chi, cultivating your energy, your prana. And that's where pranayama comes in from the Yoga Sutras. This is where all the bulk of the Taoist practices come in. They're hyper-focused on cultivating the chi to extraordinary levels, to the point of Kundalini awakening. Remember, all of chi cultivation is meant to get you to Kundalini awakening. That's the culmination. And we'll talk about that, what that means, in just a bit. So, right energy is doing practices to cultivate your vitality. Now, the thing is, though, why the Buddha didn't focus on Kundalini? Because he was trying to express the idea that you don't have to directly focus on your energy to cultivate energy. If you heal, you start to feel more vital, right? If you're in love, you feel vitality, right? If you're on the right track, vitality awakens, is the point. That's what's it's so important to know this. If you're trying to connect to something greater, you feel vitality. Naturally, things start to flow. And of course, what the East kind of held intact, there are ways to directly cultivate that vitality, is the point also. Right? Pranayama, breath work, direct meditative focus on energy, on the body, on the chakras, on the channels, the Taoists focusing specifically on the lower dantian, middle dantian, upper dantian, their way of describing the same thing, right? That's that category. Cultivating vitality and energy. Now, we're going to come back to Kundalini in a bit, because the next stage, right concentration. What is that? Oh, this gets back to also the Yoga Sutras, meditation, in the sixth stage, dharana, right before meditation stage was called dhyana, in the Yoga Sutras, and then samadhi. But right concentration, how to focus your mind. You gotta learn how to focus your mind. Otherwise, you're not gonna get far, is the thing. And the ancients were telling us that over and over again. You have to learn how to focus your mind, however you end up doing it. And it doesn't have to be in a meditative way, is the beauty of it. Of course, meditation is a direct way to focus your mind that's been handed down to us for thousands of years. But you still have to find a way to focus your attention. And it can be through the heart, it can be through the mind, it can be through action, but you have to focus. You have to cultivate focus. You have to gain control of where you're putting your energy. That's what it means. If you don't, you will be a slave and at the whim of your attention point. We all have an attention point, right? We're putting our attention. Right now it's on me. But it moves throughout the day, right? On various things where our senses take us. There's a little point, like a ping pong ball. It's always moving around. It goes inside, goes outside. It's our attention point. It only goes away in deep sleep. but it's even there in dream time, in the dream world. It's always somewhere. Meditation is about stabilizing that attention point on one thing. And that's how you directly cultivate concentration. Because concentration is all of our energy and vitality, our chi and prana is created, is programmed to go to the attention point. That's how it works. And that's the secret to manifestation as well. It's our attention, our energy is always funneling to the attention point. That's its nature, its function. Right? So if we don't have control over it, that literally means we are funneling our energy all over the place and losing it. And and I like to use the word leaking our energy all over the place all the time. And one big way we leak it is through emotions, is through being triggered. Obviously through actions and behavior. We're always leaking it, funneling it away. The problem is when we do that, we hamper our ability to progress spiritually, is the idea. Because again, wrapping around to Kundalini again, Kundalini always truly awakens when it reaches a certain threshold of energy, is the thing. How does it do that? When enough energy gathers and reaches a certain threshold, that's what we consider classical Kundalini awakening. Well, how does it happen? Well, if it's not karmic, and if it's not some spontaneous event through grace or some life event or something, generally you have to allow it to gather. Well, how do you do that? Well, then you have to get into practices, right, that have kind of been laid out. Focus, concentration practices, where you learn how to focus and gather your energy. But concentration generally will do that. Anytime, like I said, where your attention point is, energy flows. So if you practice flowing all of your energy to one spot, guess what's going to happen? That spot's going to grow. You see? And that's the opposite of leaking it. So the point is, most humans are leaking their energy all the time. Even in the smallest things we do. And this kind of quickly wrapping around to essential Buddhism and mindfulness, anytime you react with craving and aversion, how many times are you reacting with craving and aversion all day long? You're leaking by its nature. So think about what this means now, how hard this seems on the surface to not leak. Because society and culture and we're kind of programmed to leak, to give away, to expend, to use up our vitality constantly.
You getting tired?
And so, it's no surprise, it's so hard to make real progress spiritually. And I'll explain what that means to make real progress spiritually. But now, that's the essence of right concentration. You have to have that if you want to make progress. What does that lead to? And what is also important with right concentration is now the eighth limb, or the eighth wheel of the Eightfold Path, right mindfulness. Now, this was the unique gift of the Buddha, mindfulness, and what that means, which was not developed fully at the time of the Buddha, which he took and ran with and really outlined for all of us into a very practical method, which is what the gift of Buddhism really is. Right mindfulness is based on, again, remember, kind of the essence of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths. There's suffering. Everyone's suffering. But there's a remedy to suffering. And he gave us a way to practice that remedy. This is what the Four Noble Truths are, essentially, right? And so that way is Mindfulness is a term describing the beginning of that path, which essentially is, as most of you know, you begin with, okay, I'm being present, I'm noticing myself. Do you notice what you're feeling and thinking and what's going on inside of you? That's how you start into mindfulness, right? But the essence of it leads you to a place where you change how you handle yourself. This neutrality, this ability to observe and witness yourself is mindfulness. That's what that is. The ability to go, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Maybe I shouldn't act on that thought. That's mindfulness. Oh, here's what I'm feeling. Oh, I feel pretty crappy. I don't like this feeling. I see a part of me wants to go drink or eat something because of it, but I'm not going to. I'm okay. This will pass. Let me go outside instead and just take a few deep breaths. That's mindfulness. That's general basic mindfulness, right? What's the point of that? The point of that is to help us disengage from how we're constantly leaking, how we're constantly letting go of our vitality. You see? You have to learn how to disengage from what's pulling you, your sensations, your thoughts, your feelings. All of these things are really what makes up us in the present moment. Can you disengage? Can you lock into your observer witness self long enough to disengage from that and allow? Right? That's really where mindfulness leads to. Does that make sense? So then your thoughts, your sensations start to control you less. You start to have more control over them. You can observe your thoughts and sensations better. You can work with them if you need to. You can then choose to work with a thought or sensation, right? Who does that? I mean, imagine doing this all day long. You'd be pretty relaxed, wouldn't you? You'd be pretty calm. Even when something bad happens, something unforeseen or something painful, oh, well that sucks. I'll deal with that, but I'm okay.
Choose how I react.
Exactly. That doesn't define me. Whatever I'm thinking or feeling or whatever happened doesn't define me. That's not who I am. I'm not an angry person. I've just got anger running through me right now because that happened and it's making me feel this way. That is very different than saying I'm an angry person. Or, I'm just cursed with this anger and I can't do anything about it. So let me do whatever I can to manage it. That doesn't work too well for long. Another way is to realize, oh, wait a minute, I have anger for whatever reasons. And I realize it's really just a sensation running through me. And with practice, certain practices, you can learn how to let yourself feel it without giving into it, without reacting to it, right? That's true mindfulness. That leads to what's called insight from the Buddhist point of view. What is insight? Wisdom. What does wisdom truly mean? It means seeing reality as it is, as the Buddha said, not as you would like it. We always want to see things as we like it. It's natural. For our own perception, for our own point of view, obviously. Okay, but you can still do that and see reality for actually what it is, not how you're responding to it. That changes everything. And then if you can do that, if you can cultivate the wisdom, the insight, seeing things for what they are, then you can see yourself for what you are and see reality for what it is, which is then gets back to the ultimate original point of spirituality. You want to connect to God, to something greater, to the universe, to your true self. But you can't truly do that if your thoughts and sensations getting in the way, which it is for everyone, all the time. Except for maybe certain moments, for certain reasons when it's not, and that's when you have like a breakthrough. Aha. But it doesn't last, it goes away. So we try to make it last again, right? We go do the meditation again, or we go do the psychedelic again, or we go to the same place where it happened again, or we go try to find the same person again that made us feel a certain way. Right? These are all cravings, is the thing. That's the essence of what the Buddha was teaching. We're always chasing a sensation. We're chasing a feeling constantly. And the feelings aren't always bad, right? The point is, the essence of it is desire isn't bad, which is kind of a misunderstanding of essential Buddhism. Desire isn't bad. It's the fundamental nature of how humans work. There has to be desire. That's how we work. There's a hierarchy of desires, obviously, right? Things that aren't conducive to us, things that are kind of neutral, things that are helpful to us, and that are good, very health promoting, creative, and wonderful. And the grand desire of it all is, of course, the desire for full connection, liberation, enlightenment, as they call it. Whatever word you want to put into it is what they call the grand desire. And the point is, once you get there, that's when you let go of all desire. You realize there's nothing else to desire. But the point is, none of us can get there until we go through our desires, is the problem. And of course, this is what Tantra is based on, right? The full understanding of Tantra from the East is the idea that desires aren't bad. They focused on that. Now, of course, just FYI, there are different avenues of Tantra, right? And to kind of demystify that word, it's not just a certain thing that we often think of, right? Tantra, really the original context of Tantra in the East, in Hinduism and Tibetan Buddhism, is a collection of practices to transform your body and mind, to get you to the same place everyone's trying to get to. That's really what it is, Tantra, you see. But it's not rejecting or moving away from anything that we deem and judge to be inappropriate. It's one view of Tantra, right? So in essence, before Hinduism was defined as Hinduism, right, it was originally called Sanatana Dharma, the eternal truth, in India, which was the collection of everything they believed. And the underlying foundation of that were these wisdom teachings these very enlightened beings had brought forth for thousands of years, which were, on one hand, certain philosophies, and that's what the Upanishads and the Vedas are primarily based on, these core philosophies, and having the right view of things, right? And I kind of focused on this in the first talk. Having the right view of God, having the right view of soul, having the right view of purpose in life, having the right view of why we're here, right? Get that down first. Just understand it is the point. Embodying it is a whole lifelong process. And that's the point of spirituality, right? Trying to embody that. So the philosophy and the practices were essentially called the tantric practices in ancient India, you see? And so there are different areas in the north and the south where they practiced different versions of Tantra, the North Indian versions and South Indian versions. And just for fun to understand, all the tantric lineages come from this being called Shiva in ancient India. It's a whole different topic unto itself, right? But all the North Indian, South Indian lineages of Tantra are based on his teachings, which is how to transform yourself, how to cultivate your energy, how to awaken Kundalini, and then how to embody that energy once you awaken it, and then how to keep transforming your body to elite levels of human potential while training your mind to be able to handle all that, and eventually helping you fully awaken. Because the point was to be able to live long enough to do this. Because this is hard to do in one lifetime, right? Obviously. So the ancients were like, look, we got to find a way to live longer. Because if we don't, every time we come back, we forget so much, and unless you get to a certain stage, you can't remember a lot of what you did, and so you got to kind of start all over again. Ooh, let's find out a way to live longer. It's like, okay. So there are these, very mysterious beings like Shiva, like, guys, here's how. And his students, sons, his proteges, much of what modern day India is based on, Ganesh. The being, he's called Skanda, Murugan, Kartikeya. He sits on a peacock. He was another son of Shiva, and there's massive elaborate stories about these people, these beings, and their escapades and what they did, and all kinds of stuff, which is a whole different topic that I personally am fascinated with, which I think harkens back to a time on Earth that we can't even conceive of, even with predating Atlantis, predating Lemuria, some of these New Age, the Theosophy kind of gets into it a little bit, but the idea is these beings handed down these ways of doing things to normal humans to help them out, is the idea. And you see this over and over again. Prometheus in Greece, showing humans how to use fire, right? In the Sumerian Enlil, what was it, Enki? Who's the good one? Enki, I think. Yeah, Enki, helping humanity, right? With his, after meddling in our genetics, right? That's a whole different rabbit hole too. So you see this over and over again, and it's very laid out, especially in the Eastern traditions, who meddled where and who did what, in detail. So Shiva and his students, sons, proteges, Patanjali was a disciple of Shiva, according to the South Indian traditions, which is what's interesting. So did he really live only 2,000 years ago? No, that date was kind of labeled by the West just because based on when the Yoga Sutras were compiled in written form, right? But the story of Patanjali is, how did he write the Yoga Sutras? Well, the myth is there was this entrance to the underworld, to the inner earth, to where this certain abode of Nagas lived. Nagas in ancient India were the half human, half reptilian beings, half snake, half human beings. Which there were good ones and bad ones, and they were part of society back then in the ancient Indian world, ancient world in general, in other ways, in other parts of the world. But he sat near this entrance, and this Naga sage came and helped him uncover and write the Yoga Sutras. And then he brought that forth to humanity. And supposedly that place is still in India, you can go to. I haven't been, but I forget the name, but when you look online, it's one of those ancient wells that you can kind of walk down. It's like tiered, like a terrace ancient well. At the bottom is this opening, and there's like a metal covering on it that no one can open except this one priest who's allowed to it's usually filled with water. And at certain times of the year it drains, and this one priest comes and checks on it, and no one is allowed to go there. It's tended by this one priest. But the entire top of it, they built a gym over it. Where people come and work out, as far as I know, the last time I looked into it. So it's like this hidden away thing where this structure is on top of it, but underneath it is this secret place where this priest takes care of, but this is India for you, right?
Wow.
This is how people live there and just kind of understand things. But the point is, in the South Indian records, Patanjali was a direct disciple of Shiva. which is what's interesting, right? As well as Agastya. Agastya was this very popular sage in ancient India. All of the South Indian languages, Tamil, are attributed to Agastya. He came up with it, is the story. And Agastya was a direct disciple of Shiva. How old is this dude? No one knows. And he is actually one of the main contributors to the Vedas, is the thing, in much of Indian sacred texts, Agastya. In any case, I digress. So the point is, getting back to where I left off, once you start healing, and once you start asking the right questions, and kind of getting a lay of the land, and you start doing some things and feeling better, and start to kind of work on yourself in your life, cleaning things up, stopping the leaks, right? Working on your addictions, working on your phobias. That's the first stage. That's actually what's most important. Across the board, across the world, you gotta work on that stuff. Then, while you continue to work on this stuff and really heal, uncover your traumas, heal your traumas, it's all about your traumas, obviously, right, and how they've affected you. So you've got to keep doing that. But as you keep doing that, then you have to work on your energy. If you're really serious, you've got to find some way to start cultivating your energy directly, or you run out of time. Which was getting me back to the point. These beings, just to kind of digress for just a second, these beings, they were like, we're running out of time, so we got to find ways to live longer. So that's what they did. They cultivated ways to transform your physical body by directly engaging the Kundalini energy, to use that to transform your body elementally, to then be able to live longer. And they had secret concoctions they'd use. Really, that's what modern day alchemy is based on. Western alchemy, modern day alchemy is based on these concoctions that they would create to help them with this process. Not just for the sake of living forever, but to help them live long enough to fully awaken, was the point. Right? So these ancient South Indian, North Indian Siddha traditions, Siddha, these Siddha traditions, Siddha means immortals, fully realized beings, ascended beings. The modern day ascended master comes from the term Siddha that we have in the New Age, right? But these Siddhas cultivated these practices and means and ways to dramatically live longer. And from what they've handed down, they lived pretty long. What we would consider almost immortal in our eyes, some of them, is the way they would talk. And we have a glimpse of this, for example, in the Old Testament still, how long they allegedly lived, these patriarchs. But what they were doing to live that long, we don't know. It was just a different time, right, we're told. And they could live that long. Maybe, and that's partly true too, but in the East, many of these people were telling you specifically what they were doing. This is where Tantra comes from. All the modern day versions of Tantra, Tibetan, Hindu, and Buddhist Tantra, comes from these practices and teachings on how to do that. You see? And so there were bifurcations from that based on your intention. This version of Tantra was called White Tantra in the way they described it. There's Black Tantra. And this is where the ancients would describe, if you didn't work on yourself properly, like I was saying in the beginning stages, the yamas, niyamas, the ethics, the 10 Commandments, morality, all these things. If you didn't really work on that, your ego and your desires for power, attachment to pleasure, all these things are still pretty strong in you. And you start getting to these levels with that stuff, that's when you veer into what they will call Black Tantra, what we call now the dark occult. That's the thing what Christ warned us about. That's what he was warning us about. Right? Not just that all metaphysical, supernatural stuff is bad. That's kind of the misinterpretation, the modern day misinterpretation of his teaching. But he was warning that unless you have your foundation straight, unless you have your primary purpose to connect to, in Christ's words, connect to me, connect to God, if that isn't your intention, you're going to be off with what you're doing because you're going to be doing it for your ego. Right? And that's the dark occult path. That's what's called Black Tantra in the East. That's what we have these days in the world, right?
Would
What
that
we
be like
also
the
term...
Agoris, or is that just
No,
a term?
Agoris is a
Right.
specific type of Shiva-based lineages that are based
Mhm.
on some of this stuff, but they go into certain practices a little more extremely,
Yeah, very
right? So,
dark.
yeah, and so if you've ever seen like the Kumbh Mela or the pilgrimage in India, where the massive, largest gatherings of humans occur, it's a certain time of the year, every 7 years, every 14 years in India, they congregate. There's certain sects of holy men called Agoris. They're very hardcore, extreme ascetics, right? They will literally walk around naked, fully covered in this special type of clay mud, ash, okay? And they're meditating in burial sites, crematoriums,
Sitting on corpses.
and it's this really radical, extreme version of what I'm saying. Okay, from the outside, most people can't even understand it. Unless you kind of have the foundation of a lot of what we're talking about today, you see? And to most Hindus, they look at them and they're like I remember as a kid, when we visit India, I remember one time we were walking by, going to some place where these Agori yogis were sitting near a burial site, and they were meditating. I remember my grandmother telling me, "Don't look at them. Make sure you don't make eye contact. Don't look at them. Those are, Agoris who we don't trust them. They're too powerful." That was it. And that's all I remember. And so we're told to walk by not looking at them. So that's kind of the general cultural context of this, at the popular level. But what they're doing is they're doing extreme ascetic practices to, work specifically on pain, on pleasure, on death, and things like that, to answer your question.
That's what that
Yes,
was.
right. So that's Black Tantra, White Tantra, and Red Tantra now is a very specific lineage of White Tantra that focuses on using the sexual act to cultivate Kundalini. Is really what that's about, through a partner. Sacred sex in the West is based on the same thing, from a lot of you who kind of got into the mystery schools of the West and things like that, you kind of come across, oh yeah, they were doing sacred sex. When you get into the Magdalene mysteries and things like that, you really get into a lot of that, allegedly what they were doing in the Essene and the Gnostic and the Persian mystery schools, the Egyptian mystery schools, especially in the, priestess sex and the goddess-based worships. They were incorporating sacred sexuality in this way, with mindfulness, with meditation, right? As part of their whole system of cultivation. And that's the key word, system of cultivation. Usually these things were done after you progressed in certain aspects of your practices, is the thing, right? In traditional, even Red Tantra, sacred sexual Tibetan and Hindu, practices and lineages, first of all, you have a very specific guide or guru that you work with, only, right? So it's not for the common people, is the thing. You develop an intimate relationship with them. This guru or guide is supposed to be rather enlightened, not just a normal person like you. They're supposed to have achieved certain stages of cultivation, certain levels of enlightenment, which are very obvious, is the thing. So you work with them in this way. In a very direct, it can allow for rapid transformation. If you can just imagine, right? You know, making love to a being who has no lust in them at all, who is in pure love, who is simply, literally meditating, just to kind of give some detail, literally meditating on you to help awaken your Kundalini in that state. Imagine that. Right? That's kind of what's happening in this context, right? So you can imagine then it would be a rapid energetic cultivation, right? The orgasm is the physical representation of Kundalini, is the thing. The sexual energy that we all have to deal with in our life is the physical representation of this word Kundalini that we keep mentioning. I keep mentioning. It's been mentioned. You see? So, the Red Tantra paths use that for a direct way to cultivate Kundalini, is the thing. That's what all this is based on, the Tantra stuff, especially the Red Tantra or the Neo Tantra that we have in the West. And the sexual energy is the prime area, of course, we leak a lot of our energy from, is the thing. So that's why the whole theme of sex becomes the primary target in the beginning for how you handle it, for your ethics and morality and things like that, right? Gotta get a hold of that. Because if you don't, that will derail you, plain and simple, down the road. And that's what you see, unfortunately, in modern day, many modern day Eastern yogis and gurus who come over here. The list is endless. Get on Netflix. And you'll see plenty.
It's a lot
right?
of power to have over
A lot
somebody.
of power, you know, they're doing some stuff. They're cultivating energy. They're doing stuff. They're holding masses. You know, they're holding the energy of masses in front of them, right? You know, they're working with lots of energy. But as the energy is moving through them, all the energy is going to trigger what they still have in them that they haven't fully worked on or resolved. And it has to do with the first three chakras. The lower dantian, the pelvis. This area where we hold most of our trauma and issues. Right? If you don't heal that stuff, you're gonna be forced to deal with it if you engage higher energy down the road. And that's what derails people on the Kundalini path. Okay? So, but Kundalini is a direct sign stage to work towards because you can't escape it, is the thing. And the sooner you understand it, the better you're going to be in terms of progressing along this. Because, now, so if you're meditating, Kundalini will awaken in some way or another. It's bound to. And the beauty is, what I want to impress upon you, this is a genetic, hardwired event, is the thing. It's in our DNA to awaken Kundalini, because no matter how you do it, it happens. Which is what's fascinating. Now, it's important to understand, Kundalini is not a thing. It's a process. We mistake it as an event sometimes. But it's a process. There's a beginning, sure, and the beginning seems like specific events. Because really what's happening, a certain level of energy has passed a certain threshold due to something, some healing work, something, some experience, some karma, some grace, whatever. And there's a burst of this energy that then explodes in you. And it's supposed to, because we have pathways for it. And so it happens. And when it happens, though, it can have certain effects. If you're not ready for it, I'm sorry. But if you're ready for it, awesome. It can take you really far, is the thing. usually you don't realize it's happening and it's happening, is the thing. Most people, it happens and they don't even realize it. Even the most non-spiritual person, it happens and they don't realize it. And the way it happens, because usually in the most, if you're a pure muggle with no real practice of spirituality, you're just kind of doing your thing, and you have a normal, wonderful human experience of, say, love, a sudden burst of happiness or joy doing something you love, or something, being out in nature, or whatever event or something, or being around someone. Well, that is creating this gathering of energy in you. You see? That's what that is. It's the same energy. Now, if it has nowhere to go, you'll usually end up leaking it out. Circling back to it. Because you can't handle it. You're not prepared for it. Tell me if I'm wrong. So you feel good one day, and you go do everything you can. You go work out hard as you can, because you got some extra energy, you're feeling great. Or you feel some discomfort coming up somewhere, and you go do something to soothe yourself, take away the pain. It's the same thing. That's what I'm trying to say. It is a sliver of vitality that's awakening in you. And if you don't know what's happening, you will usually expend it, leak it, direct it some way. Most people in a higher way of cultivation will use it for some creativity. Creative energy is the same as sexual energy, which is the same as Kundalini energy. Is the thing, right? So most of us will end up channeling into creativity. Music, art, making something, doing something, whatever. That's how most humans end up focusing it. It's a source of our creativity. It moves up inside of us into the higher centers, and we let it out. You see? That's what I mean. We're always doing something with it. Kundalini is the Christian term for the Holy Spirit. It's the same thing. But they just made it into a dove. An invisible ghost. Okay? You can't really do much with that, right? If you read some of the works of some of the Catholic mystics, then they're talking about holy fire. Okay, now we're getting somewhere, right? And then they're working with that. Incendium memoriam, I think is the term, right? The loving fire that awakens in us, that we feel. The Holy Spirit has entered my spine and rises up. They're saying the same thing as the people in the East. So the Kundalini energy will awaken. Now, if you're meditating, if you're doing practices, now I mentioned, okay, if you're progressing in meditation, what will happen is you'll start to get very still. Whoa, time has flown by.
Oh, yeah.
You'll start to get very still. Your breath will slow down. Your breath will quiet down and get still. Kundalini is a process because true classical Kundalini is when it enters the central channel, the Sushumna in Sanskrit, the Taijipo in Taoism. The central channel, this invisible central axis in our spine that the chakras are actually on top of, is the idea. The central channel is where this is going. That's where this Kundalini energy has to get to. But the gate is closed. Naturally. We're born with a closed gate. Most humans are born with a closed gate at this time, at this age, in this world age. Born with a closed gate. But when that gate opens and the energy is actually able to go in through there, based on achieving certain thresholds of energy, things like that, then that is classical Kundalini awakening. That gate would only open when the breath ceases. Just so you know. In deep meditation, you'll often find reference to the breath becoming still. 0 point still. Kumbhaka breath retention is the same thing. They're making you practice to get to there. Right? The Taoists speak of it as well. You stop breathing. Okay? There's no need to breathe. The mind follows the breath. The breath follows the mind. Your mind is still. No more thoughts. Empty mind occurs. The body is still. So, this is a very advanced stage of meditation, obviously. Okay, you can't force this. You can do stuff to kind of work on it and kind of help things along, like I'm saying, but you can't force it. It will happen when it happens, if it's going to happen in your lifetime. But the goal is to kind of do everything you can to get to there, especially in a meditative tradition-based practice. When the breath is still, that's when the gate opens and the Kundalini enters the central channel, and that's when it's called classical Kundalini. The Taoists really describe this and let you know specifically all of the practices they're doing in Taoism is to prepare for that gate opening. In the beginning especially, the Qigong, the Neigong practices that most of you may be familiar with, this cultivating lower dantian, as it's called in Taoism, for two chakras, they call it this container, is the way they look at it. They're gathering energy here, gathering energy here, gathering energy here with certain practices, certain breathing, until a certain threshold reaches and the gate opens. And from the Taoist perspective, for those of you who know, the gate won't open until the microcosmic orbit is fully cultivated as well. The channel that goes up and down the back. Okay? So before you open the gate, before you open the central channel, there were spinal accessory channels that have to open. That's the microcosmic orbit in Taoism, the Du and the Ren channel, for those of you who know in Chinese medicine, up the back, down the front, and the Ida and the Pingala in the yogic systems. The two channels that go like this, crisscross. Okay, that you see in the Indian-based systems, right? They're technically two different systems. They're two different channels, which is what's interesting. But they get confusing in the beginning because like, they seem different. They kind of are different, but they're really not different, but they feel different. And the chakras are technically every time that either the two channels meet, or where the chakras traditionally come from, the understanding of that, right? But from the Hindu point of view, the male and female channels are the Ida and Pingala, and those are about balancing your male and female energies, right? And that's really the bulk of your initial spiritual cultivation. You've got to balance your male and female. That's what it's about, right? And most spiritual systems is focused on that so much because it's so important. But that's just, you haven't even gotten into Kundalini yet, just so you know. That's still not Kundalini. That's pre-Kundalini, technically speaking. I put it into the Kundalini process because it feels like Kundalini to most people. But for most people, when they have first experiences of this energy, I feel something on my back. My body is vibrating. Or you feel tingling all over. That's pre-Kundalini. Your channels are opening out, which is great. Those spinal channels are opening out, which is great.
How long does that last?
Maybe your whole lifetime. It's the bulk of what most people are going to experience in these practices,
Yeah.
is the thing. Because when you read stories about real Kundalini from people who have really experienced it, it's otherworldly, usually. So, just finally to give this some context, what Kundalini means is it's a description, ultimately, for divine energy coming into our being. That's it. And however you want to look at it, you can. Holy Spirit, sacred fire, coiled serpent, all of these things. But in the most esoteric Eastern traditions, they call Kundalini the goddess, Shakti, divine power. That's how they talk about it, as, oh, she has entered me now. I've opened up to the goddess. Again, going back to what the ancient Western traditions were doing as well with this. But the goddess, the female aspect of the divine, is, like I talked a lot about in the last talk, is the way the ancient world would often term God as the goddess. In India, specifically, Durga, Shakti, Parvati, Kali. So, God is this divine mother, and she enters you. What's happening is that you are really opening yourself finally to, at the first level, your higher self. Is that we can understand it better. Is the thing. This is how higher self embodies. Higher self being an aspect of your greater self, your greater soul, which is an aspect of divine essence, which is an aspect of God, goddess. Same thing. The point is, though, this is what Kundalini is. It's the divine coming into our being, but there's a pathway and a system for it, which is what's amazing. This is what I'm talking about, that the ancients gave us. This system is laid, it will happen when the time is right. But this is how it happens. And these are some signs. The breath gets very still. When you're meditating and the breath is getting very still, that's good. If you lose track of the breath and you can't find it, that's good. It's getting still. Keep working. When you start to feel things moving in your body, energy moving, good. You're getting to certain energies starting to awaken, that have to awaken in your body, good. When you feel vibrant energy flowing through you with whatever you're doing, dance or Kundalini yoga or other practices or meditating, that's what's happening. Your energy channels are opening up. Yes. But the ancient systems would say, don't stop there. Even in the Tantric traditions, Red Tantra was meant to awaken Kundalini. Once it's awakened, you don't do that anymore, is what usually isn't told. You don't need to, right? When Kundalini fully awakens, you are at the threshold of Samadhi or at Samadhi, for those of you who know that term. One of the highest levels of meditation. Only if Kundalini has entered central channel will you be in Samadhi. You're in Samadhi if Kundalini is awakened. Mm-hmm. That's how you know, is the thing. And Samadhi is an expanded state of consciousness where you and what you're focusing on has become one. That's how it's described, where it's an experiential state, where you feel no separation now between what you're focusing on and yourself, your ego. But that only happens if certain groundwork has been laid already in your body, in your energy system, and in your mind. And then things lead on from there. And then in the spiritual context of things, Kundalini awakening is beginner level. In the Mahayana Buddhist and the Tibetan Buddhist systems, it's placed at the beginning.
Wow.
Kundalini awakening. The Buddha didn't even talk about it. He's like, look, people spend way too much time on that and they get derailed and sidetracked. You got to focus on mindfulness first. So in Buddhist systems, it's oftentimes glossed over, but the people doing Zen, the people doing Theravada Buddhism, the people doing Vipassana, they're going through this stuff too. But because they're not focusing on it, it's really rapidly moving through them. They're like flying through these transformations. Because Kundalini will transform you, that's the thing. When this energy awakens, descends, however you want to look at it, it starts changing you, is the thing. It's a level of energy that will change you at a cellular level. It's the way they talk about it, it changes your elements. The true inner alchemy, that's what it comes down to. Alchemy comes from this idea of changing elements, right? But the true inner alchemy is changing your internal elements. And that's what a lot of esoteric systems are based on, right? Cultivating Kundalini is the fire element that awakens. And then the breath is the air element that transforms. And the heart substance and the bones in the body are the earth element. And the fluids in the body are the water element. So Kundalini actually transforms all of those. And what that transformation means is a whole different topic. But the point is, where we're at, in the grand scheme of things, Kundalini is here. Okay? To put things into context, Kundalini is here. If we take this, if we forget all about this, if we take here and expand this out, here, then wherever you are here is important to realize. And if you're cultivating energy in a direct way, you're really moving along this way. And if you're doing it indirectly, and you realize now it's been happening all along, you're still moving along, is the thing. And this process of moving along, it doesn't matter what you believe in, is the thing. That's the kicker here. What you believe in may help you move along, or it may hinder. But ultimately, it doesn't matter how you see God, how you see soul, how you see different dimensions, whatever, it doesn't really matter, is the thing. What matters is, if you're training yourself how to be less reactive to yourself, basic mindfulness, insight cultivation, knowing how to focus your mind, the Eightfold Path of Buddha. If you're focused on those things, you will move along by default. Slowly but surely. But you gotta keep healing your stuff, is the thing. You gotta keep working on your anger. You gotta keep working on fear. You gotta keep working on lust. You gotta keep working on greed. All of these things that are in all of us in different amounts, which what it means to be human, our shadow. Our shadow is there. And spirituality is not about eliminating the shadow, is the kicker here. Nowhere along this is getting rid of the ego. That's the big modern day often misinterpretation. The ego is coming along for the ride, but transforming. The body and the mind and the ego are transforming. When I keep using the word transforming, Kundalini transforms the body and the mind and the ego so that the full human self can embody the divine. That's the whole point of it, right? That's why you got to keep healing. You got to keep working on your stuff. Because if you don't, you will be forced to work on your stuff, whether you like it or not, eventually. So instead of waiting around to get slapped on the face, okay, let me go and preemptively
Slap myself. Slap myself.
dig in before that has to happen.
Big universal
Definitely.
2x4.
It's definitely what the lodge feels like.
Yeah, exactly. It begins with healing, and you heal all the way. Even when you fully awaken and reach enlightenment, you're probably still healing. Some of the greatest enlightened beings, even in modern day times, often died of cancer, or often died of this disease or that disease. What's going on? Why? Well, either clearing out the disease and healing their body wasn't important to them. Because what happens is, if you gain true enlightenment before you fully physically cultivate your energy and body, you don't care at that point
Yeah.
Yeah.
to do that. And that's kind of what happens. You don't care. So you're like, I'm dying, so what? I know death is not real. I'm going to still be here when I die. That's how they talk, right?
Yeah.
But then you also have those who are doing dramatic work on themselves while they're awakening, and they're the ones who can live pretty long, and by the time they awaken, they're like pretty good examples of human potential. They're healthy and vibrant, they look youthful. You don't see a lot of them these days walking around, but I tell you, they're walking around. They're there. They're around us. We'll never know it. Is the thing. In any case, okay. I ended up talking again for 2 hours.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. In closing, any questions or thoughts? Like I said, I'm going to post whatever video I could gather today online, so it'll be there in the future. And my intention here is to really create a community. And I'll be sending you invites to like a community app soon, like Mighty Network's one of those, so we can all kind of stay connected and just kind of stay informed and discuss things and get to know each other and things like that. Because I really want to expand this and ground this into kind of a center, if you will, right? So I already have a nonprofit that this is associated with, but I haven't fully integrated it yet, and but it's there. So I'll be doing that over the next few weeks and months. So just want to kind of throw that out there and let you guys know. And if you guys want to be part of that and help me with that, let me know.
I was just about to ask you
Yes.
need some
If
help.
you have any experience with nonprofits, things like that, I want there's a lot I have to share in a very unique, particular way that I think is very helpful to people. And so it's this universal system of looking at things, but I want to bring in others and to make it a community where it's a center or a hub for this way of being and living in this way that includes, holistic natural health care, cultivating yourself, and really the full potential of spirituality from a universal point of view. So, just want to throw that out there.
That's a great idea. That's fantastic.
So any final thoughts, questions?
What's the YouTube channel where that previous video can be found?
I will send you the link.
Okay.
You can just search my name for now. It's under my name.
It's pretty easy to find.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna have it in my name.
yeah. Just search my name, my full name, and it'll show up.
Great.
There's not too many with my name.
I have a question. So you talked about energy and like cultivating the chi and stuff. So I studied under a Tai Chi master for about a year,
Mhm.
and you always do Qigong, I guess, to collect the energy. And you do Tai Chi is like after the Qigong. But he would always say, as we stopped the Tai Chi, you would always pat yourself out to get rid of any excess chi. And he said, too much excess chi could cause a heart attack and stuff like that. So it was very interesting. I guess maybe it's the way it collects or like the way it uses. And I was just wondering what your thoughts on that
So
were.
Tai Chi, Qigong, the Taoist approach,
Mhm.
right? They were elite masters at Qi cultivation. That's what they focused on and specialized in
Mhm.
China, in ancient China. So they have a whole process of Qi cultivation. And so Tai Chi is just a version of Qigong, which is really the basic level of what I'm speaking of, which is to basically
Mhm.
open up the major 12 channels and get more Qi flowing through that, right? And Tai Chi is just a version of that to make it more, more martial and to have it flow in a particular way and direct it. But yes, if we gather too much and we can't handle it,
Mhm. That's what I was thinking.
it can be disruptive, right? We may not know what to do with it, and it may get used in various ways, good or bad. So
Mhm.
that's kind of where that comes from. To once you do that, okay,
Pat yourself off.
pat yourself
clean.
down, kind of come back to your baseline. It's all about your baseline with things, you can't stretch yourself too far. If you do, you're gonna get pulled back. But we still have those experiences sometimes where we get stretched, and they're great sometimes, but you're gonna get pulled back, right? And so that's the thing. You do these things until you keep getting pulled back, but if you keep doing these things, your baseline increases. So eventually you don't have to pat yourself down,
Yeah.
is the thing, right? But Tai Chi is a general activity for everyone, so it's a good idea. And so that kind of gets into more specific Qi cultivation practices that you mentioned. But that's why they would do that. Yeah.
Because it's interesting as I learn more about all of it. I mean, like we're saying, they're all talking about the same thing.
Right.
It's just different paths the same way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I just was gonna seek some clarity on, earlier you had mentioned it was the black tantra versus the white tantra. And so I was just wondering if I could get a little clarity on, was the difference in, so is the tantra the use of the energy and the direction in which it's used being black tantra maybe being more ego-based versus white tantra being more...
Yes. Tantra is just a term for cultivating energy directly. Right. So all the classical works on Kundalini, cultivating, all the Kriya Yoga based. When you see the word Kriya, whether it's Yogananda's version of Kriya Yoga or the general term Kriya, it comes from the same thing, right? The Tantra based sacred writings, which is to cultivate energy through direct means, whether it's meditation, movement, breath work, whatever, is really what it is. And so that also includes specific meditations where you're using energy in particular ways. So the unique aspect of most Tantra is embodiment practices. So you get this more into like Tibetan and Hindu-based Tantras at higher levels, but these days you get them in the beginner levels, which is, you'll focus on a certain image of a deity with certain mantras and things like that as a specific meditation that you do. And at the beginning level, it's to not just help with concentration, with meditation, but to the idea is to bring the archetypal energies of that deity to you.
Okay.
Right? That's what embodiment practices are. But the point of that is you are trying to embody the being, is what usually you don't get at the beginning, but where it eventually goes at a higher level, just to kind of let you know these beings are not just visualizations, is the thing in these systems. Because they're using these beings who are either part of their lineage or who've been deified part of their lineage, you see? So like, Shiva or Parvati will be typically what, Hindu-based Tantra systems were based on, or versions of Shiva is the thing. And Tibetans have the whole pantheon of male and female that they focus on, but what they're doing is they're embodying the energy of that being by focusing on them to accelerate your own progression. In the same way you want to learn a musical instrument, you learn from someone who's been doing it for a while. So if you sit with a master guitarist 2 hours a day, one-on-one, with their sole attention, you will learn a lot faster than like a YouTube video doing it for 30 minutes, right? Same thing. So the idea was these embodiment practices, if you can connect to the beginning level, and then learn how to, if you get your meditation so strong to a level where it's all there is this being. When you read accounts about what that's like, it's like, oh my gosh. If you can do that, it's almost like the real maximum potential of channeling is the idea. You're channeling this being, which you're not always told in the beginning, but that's what's happening, and that's the point. You're channeling, say, for example, Tara, the divine feminine. You're doing that for hours and hours. They focused, and eventually you're gonna start feeling that energy, the embodiment. You're gonna embody her, is the thing. Because who you're trying to embody is such a massive consciousness at this point. That's gonna happen. You just try to embody your mom, that's not gonna happen. She may feel something a little bit, but your mom's consciousness is still locked in her body. But a high level cosmic being who is not limited to a body anymore. You can channel them. And that's what kind of a lot of what we do is, right? You can channel them. And they can really come. Like when you read some of the ancient myths and stories, especially from ancient India, they're coming down in front of you. You meditate on, Vishnu for this being meditates on Vishnu for 10 years straight. Vishnu appears before him. Good job. What do you want? The typical story then is this person meditating, still had a very strong ego, but he's a master meditator, which is very interesting now, right? Meditation doesn't always mean you're enlightened. So this master meditator who could sit in meditation for like unmoving for 24 hours for years, think about that. We can't even fathom that, right? So what do you want? This guy goes, I want to be invulnerable. No man or God can defeat me in battle. Vishnu, cosmic version of God, fine, whatever.
Trickster.
Suddenly, this being gets this boon in the myth, goes on a rampage. He's a warlord. He goes conquering, in the story, the heavens and the earth, literally. And now the gods in the lower heavens are like, what? Damn, we can't stop him. What do we do? They convene, what do we do? So they go upon the creator god Brahma. Okay, what do we do? Then they go, okay, fine. There's a loophole. He didn't say woman or goddess. Great. Send the full manifestation of the divine feminine. And that's the story of Durga. If you read about it, Durga and Kali, that's the myth of that. Then she comes down, kicks his butt effortlessly. And there you go. But the point is now, you can do, that's what embodiment practice is, getting back to Tantra, is based on these ideas. But it's all focused on using your mind and practices to cultivate energy. And so Black Tantra is doing that with ego. And then Red Tantra is hyper-focusing on using a partner in a specific way to do that. But generally Tantra doesn't always mean, right, Red Tantra when it's spoken of in the East, in the Hindu Buddhist concept.
It's just the cultivation of
Yes.
energy, however you do
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Do you think it's wrong to use tools to help? Like various other tools, like maybe psychedelic substances or things like that?
No, that's the thing though. It's
maybe
like, as long as you have the roadmap in your mind and as it clarifies, the point is to, we're not going to be living 400 years.
yes, get as much done as we can.
Help yourself, which is the beauty of living now. We have so much access to tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point of Tantra. The goal of Tantra was to accelerate the process. That's what they're trying to do. So now we have so many other means too, in the context, with psychedelics, with,
Internet.
I mean, just getting
Yeah.
energy work and body work.
Yeah, I was
Healing
gonna
work,
say, yeah,
right?
it's-
Yeah.
Oh my God,
Conversations.
Right.
And I've had things happen.
Exactly.
Any
Really
tool
can
can be
exist
bad or
kind of
good.
like-
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we got to use everything we got to help us along the way. If you keep the roadmap in your mind, that's the key. If you don't keep the roadmap, you can get sidetracked, derailed, attached, lose your way, whatever.
Become a warlord.
I know, after 10 years.
Egomaniac.
I mean,
Spiritual
He'd been
egomaniac.
sitting
Yeah.
long enough. He was ready to run.
If I could ask a question,
honestly
this is
think that
during the Kundalini, when your body shakes, is the body shaking, are you actually losing energy, picking up energy, or is it nothing to do with energy?
In the beginning, when the body's shaking, it's usually because certain channels are opening up, right? And so there's usually restriction in those channels. That's what's
Yeah.
causing the
That's
experience
when
of
it
the
was the
phenomenon.
worst. At the beginning it was
Right.
the worst.
If there's no if your channels are fully open and Kundalini awakens, it's orgasmic. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's absolutely divine. When it's anything other than that, something's clearing in you. So the shaking is some restriction. Oftentimes, there is some physical restriction, say in your fascia, in your spine or something, that's causing that, and you need that to occur. So what's happening is there's actually a healing therapeutic event happening, is the
Yeah,
thing.
your body shaking.
You're vibrating, you're moving,
Your
yeah.
legs
So the-
fly up in the air.
Yeah, so the key is to let it happen. You don't want to stop it.
So then this that went on for say 6 months, and then after that, it sort of went somewhat dormant. But then it kind of started again, but not quite the same, not as aggressive. So would that mean a new thing?
A new layer possibly, yes. Something deeper is coming up now. Everyone will express their things in different ways, is the other thing. And if anyone who is into healing work and stuff kind of knows this, how the body will express healing in different ways.
Mm.
Some people don't shake. Some people have crazy third eye experiences.
Yeah.
Colors and visions, all kinds of stuff. Other people who have a lot of physical somatic experiences see nothing. Nothing going on. It's a lot of my thing. I don't really have much going on in terms of psychedelic stuff or DMT, third eye stuff. It's very body oriented.
Yours is body oriented.
Yeah.
Do you have
Depends on
a lot
what
of
energy
tingling?
center it's moving.
Tingling, movement, vibrating, shaking. I went through a lot of
Yeah.
that.
I mean,
the
tingling.
thing.
I have tingling right now.
Yeah.
I have a tingling. If
Yeah.
I lay down and tingling
Right.
starts right away.
So it can be either or, all of it, some of it. It's different avenues of how things express is the thing. So it's really hard to kind of compare and judge is the most important thing. You just don't know. Some people could be emotional. Dramatic emotions coming up all of a sudden. You don't know why or how or crying all the time.
I have that too.
Yeah. Or suddenly scared. Like, initial Kundalini process is a healing experience. So it's going to look like a healing release.
And then
Is
after
the thing.
that, it goes to,
Once you get through the initial stage, you've released enough, cleared enough, things quiet down. Your system stabilizes and gets used to, you've raised your baseline. You see? So then it changes.
you basically your awareness, your,
How things are moving, how energy is moving through you. You've raised your baseline. So there's less restriction, less blockages in your energy system. So you don't have to experience dramatic shaking
yeah.
in the beginning, like you did in the beginning. Eventually it's just still and
I
quiet.
didn't even get there yet.
But that's what's going to happen eventually. If once you let it, and kind of at your stage, getting body work, energy work is really helpful for when you're
I
having.
knew
these-
to
these
never,
events.
never try to restrict it, just let
Good,
it do
yeah.
whatever it needs to do,
Yeah.
and, so
And
that's-
what you can do, kind of what I did, to work with it, you can promote it in a healing setting. So you can like lay on the ground, okay? Make sure you're not disturbed, all right? And then ask it to begin. Ask it to start. And it's like you're letting it happen, but you could stop it if you want. It's that feeling. So if you can engage with it, sometimes like a quick shaking, but you're letting it happen on the ground. You could stop it if you wanted to, but you're not.
Yeah, I don't stop
You
it.
see?
It's almost as, when I lay down, it knows, okay, you can start now. I don't even have to
Right.
tell it, it knows, okay.
So good. So you can use that for people like you who kind of have this. You can use it. Give yourself 10 minutes to do that. Just go nuts. Make sure no one walks in because they'll think you're having a seizure. Seriously,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would appear.
because it can look like that.
Yes.
Your breath can start restricting. You can start like undulating and crazy stuff,
Yeah.
screaming, and
I don't think I'm screaming.
so that's a way to kind of accelerate this process and then stop it when you're done.
If other people want to ask questions, but I've had so many of these experiences, has it ever happened that, or what would explain that, you have that, but then at night, you almost like injure yourself? Like, for example, I get so tension in my foot that I pull the muscle on the bottom of my foot. I couldn't even stand on my foot. Another night, I scratched my eyeball without, like, I don't even know. So it's like I'm getting injured. I have felt like there's a knife on my throat, and I woke up and like coughing because is that some
So
other
this
crazy thing happening?
we
or-
may need to talk later after this
Yeah, it is.
but it could be connected to the intensity of some of the traumas you have and kind of what's coming up for you. That's why it's kind of so almost violent
Yeah.
or aggressive in this way.
Could it be another person that I'm either thinking about or that
There,
is involved in some?
there, it get complicated. Yes,
Yeah.
it's a whole different topic, but there could be what's called entity involvement. There could be things messing with you. On top of that, that's seems like a separate thing, but could be part of your actual healing process, right? Whole different topic. It could be you need simply more magnesium
No, that's
for your
probably-
muscles. It could be some of that as well,
Yeah.
but it could be a whole bunch of different things. But I think if you do some more awake, conscious release like this, you may minimize the amount that comes up during sleep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Like, the one in particular that just happened is, there was somebody that I hurt years and years ago, that I just became aware of this week. And that person, like, now becomes, like, my awareness just opens that up. And I feel like that person also became aware and is like through her mind attacking me or something like that.
Sounds like there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so my advice to you simply would be, find a balance with letting it happen and making sure you're okay. Right? So the simplest advice to you would be,
Don't sleep.
well, before sleep, do some conscious releasing. Do some conscious releasing before sleep. And see if that helps with some of the intensity that's coming up through sleep,
Okay.
just to begin with.
Yeah, and I basically, like, one person told me, before you go to sleep, just say out loud that you have the Holy Spirit in you and you are protected by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And then nothing's gonna happen. I tried that and that actually helped.
Yeah,
Which
so
should help.
there could be a lot of other elements going on, so you may need to talk afterwards.
I think a good bit of that might actually be some subconscious material that you need to deal with as well. But B, do you have a technical term for when, because this has been happening, well, it doesn't happen as much anymore as it used to. It almost feels at certain points when I lay down, like my spirit is doing like an internal rotation inside my body. Do you have a name for that?
Yeah, so you're feeling your energy body starting to move, independent of your physical body. So that's an actual phase of when certain energy is starting to move through you, through your channels.
Yeah, I just,
So-
like, I knew what it was, but I didn't know if there was a name for it though. Like, I knew it was my energy moving, but I didn't know if there was like a technical.
There's not really a
term.
technical name.
Okay.
It's a specific stage.
Cause that started happening to me
happens,
about like
yeah.
3 years ago.
Right. And so it's just something you gotta just work through and let happen. And it can be weird. Your body, first, for some people the body starts moving on its own. Like,
At a certain
you're
point,
meditating,
I
suddenly the
learned
arm
you
starts
just have to
raising.
surrender to a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. Like I went through my arm starting to raise. I'm like, I could stop it if I wanted to, but I'm like, wait, why is my hand raising? What's going on? And so if you don't know what's happening, it looks freaky, right? And this is kind of what derails a lot of people looking at this coming from, like, say, a Christian or Islamic point of view. Oh my gosh, you've been possessed.
Yeah, demons,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not that. Because if you were possessed,
Right.
you wouldn't be calm inside, is the thing, right? And especially in a meditative setting, there are different things you would look at, look out for if that were to happen. But generally, a stage that happens when certain fascia unwinds, it can literally start to move you, and that's what's happening, right? And then when your energy body starts to unwind, it can feel like you're moving, but you're not. Like you're sitting there and suddenly you feel like you're rotating. Literally you're rotating, but you open your eyes and you're like still right there. Close your eyes, you're rotating. Or you're suddenly horizontal. But you're not. Stuff like that can happen. right?
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to touch on something because, of course, you know, I think a lot of us have kind of perused through different systems. When y'all were talking about the Black Tantra and the White Tantra, it made me think about how some of the things that I found in the Bible where it says, you cannot take the kingdom of heaven by force. So that's also falling in line with the 8 arms, because if you're trying to go about raising this energy in the wrong way, you're trying to take that energy, you're trying to take, quote unquote, the kingdom of heaven by force.
Right, right.
You're trying to go through the path of the ego instead of going through the path of the Shuna. And so, what I think is funny about how we have these representations of the serpent and the dove, when we think of that serpentine energy, you know, it doesn't have any arms or any legs. You know, it just rides on its belly. And something funny that I found out about that, they actually have these old sayings talking about how the serpents, they eat the dust. It's basically an insult. You know, you're solely just focused on the material. That's what it's symbolic of. And as you're raising this energy starts to take wings and take flight. And so that's actually why the Holy Spirit is represented by the dove.
Right. And you still see that.
It's etheric. It's no longer just primal, you know, just base energy. It's
Yeah.
it's etheric at that point.
You still see that in the traditional caduceus symbol,
Yes.
where the 2 intertwining snakes,
Yeah.
the staff of Apollo, the original staff of
Hermetic,
Apollo,
hermetic staff as
Yeah.
well.
the 2 snakes meeting at the top with the wings. Right, that's what it
Yes.
symbolizes. The
Mhm.
Eden, the Pingala are the 2 channels.
Mhm.
Right, the staff is the central channel in the middle.
And it's symbolic actually of the
Meeting.
spine.
Yeah.
So the other thing about the taking heaven by force, because I had heard, you know, sometimes, I know everybody receives their information differently, but I actually get like download like actual words and phrases. And when you're talking about Kundalini energy, how, you know, it's just, that's like, it's not even the finishing point. I had heard in my spirit, it's the beginning of the end of the beginning. And, all of this is leading up to a culmination of these different energies in us being able to integrate into one, as opposed to having all of our energy scattered and our focus in different places.
Right.
Jacob's ladder, the spine. It's
Exactly.
like, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that people don't even know. It's like, it's metaphysical stuff. It has nothing to do with religion.
Yeah.
The Bible actually is like a mishmash, hodgepodge of
Oh,
different
yeah,
traditions.
the book of Psalms there's a lot of like people have argued that there's a lot of spells in the book of Psalms that in like Christian
Yeah.
mysticism, and I've integrated that kind of into my work as well, where it's like, yeah.
I know, we kinda talked
Yeah,
about that
we
the last time we
did.
talked.